Hello, welcome to Shrink Wrap. My name is Edna Lezotte, and I am a social worker that does some therapy work and consulting. And my co host is Szifra Birke, and Szifra is a business coach.
Good.
All right. The title of today's show is Don't Tell, Do Ask. And the basis of it is a book that Szifra recommended to me. It's called Humble Inquiry by Schein is the author. He also wrote another book called Helping, which I halfway read through that. So what's humble inquiry? It sounds like something that will absolutely ruin my self-esteem.
Wow.
The word humble, yeah.
Because
I don't know.
So let me be curious right away
Yeah.
before I even define humble inquiry.
Well,
I'm so
humble
curious
inquiry
to
for me, when I read the word humble,
know.
it conjures up all kinds of things that I have to do that are gonna affect my self-esteem.
Like just the idea of being
Humble,
yeah, already affects your sense of like
because that's not what our
self-determination?
society is. We're not about humble. We're about individualism and building ourselves up and being successful and look at all our toys, and we are not humble. I mean, that comes from the Old Testament, or the Quaker religion. So what does he mean by humble inquiry?
Wow, that's so great. I wish I was going to say I wish we had that on tape, but we do.
We do have it.
We now have it on
You'll
tape.
have it forever.
Right. So he's really talking about something that maybe you're addressing head on, which is that leaders especially need to create a situation where they are willing to be humble with the recognition that the people who work for them are vitally important to them and vitally important to the success of the project, the success of the firm, the company, the organization. And if the leader doesn't know that things might be going on, that could be a safety issue that's not being handled well. It could be a hygienist in a dental office who's not doing his or her work well. It could be a lawyer in a firm,
Somebody stealing your petty cash.
It could be any of those things. It could be a nurse in an operating room who isn't telling the doc that he or she is about to make a real mistake.
Mm-hmm.
If there isn't a culture where the leader is able to be humble with the people who work for them, then all sorts of bad consequences emerge. And so in that sense, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I would say if I were a leader, why should I bother with that? I'm busy enough.
Right.
Just let them do what I tell them. Let them do a good job. I trust them to do a good job, but I don't want to hear all this touchy-feely stuff.
Right. And interestingly enough, it doesn't really need to be touchy-feely, right? It could be really straightforward communication. However, what you're saying is right, that leaders often really are busy enough. And they walk around with the expectation that, just do what I tell you. I've got my job, you've got your job, just do it. The problems come up in all sorts of insidious ways. Sometimes it comes up in terms of the way profit ends up being, not made. Profits, all the losses, because there may be huge waste in a manufacturing situation. And the leader has no idea about that because it's 17 steps down from his or her position. It may be something like hospital errors. You've worked in hospitals and you've worked with doctors. Have you ever had the experience of a nurse or a nurse practitioner not telling a doctor something important?
No, but if they do tell them, my experience has been they tell them in a way that almost looks like humble and a curious way. So tell me why you prescribed that medication for Szifra Birke. In other words, instead of saying to him, that medication's never used for what is the matter with Szifra. So the subordinate really uses the humble inquiry to get what they want, to get what they need to function as a team, and I think that's kind of unusual. It's like a nurse has been working with a doc forever, and they have some kind of a relationship. We don't really know what it is, but they feel comfortable enough to even use humble inquiry with a person.
So you're saying they're speaking up. They're speaking up in a sort of deferential way. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if it's deferential. See, that's the thing about humble.
Okay.
I think it's just a question.
Okay.
So tell me, Dr. Szifra, why you're prescribing this medication. Is it new? Is it, what? Because she was on XYZ and now you're changing it to ABC, which she's thinking, you prescribe ABC, she's going to have horrible side effects. But she isn't addressing him in that manner.
So it's interesting that I wouldn't have taken that to be humble. I would take it to be something else, like a disguise, a statement embedded in a question. Sort of, now the doc may not recognize that, but when I think about the kind of humble inquiry I think makes sense for leaders or parents or teachers, or it's really out of an honest curiosity and an honest interest.
Okay.
So it's a different kind of question, and it's only used in certain situations.
Well, maybe it is a question for her. Maybe she doesn't have an ulterior motive.
Okay.
Maybe she's not afraid to speak up with him because she's worked with him for 30 years and she knows that he won't be upset.
Right.
But
and
it comes as a question.
it's diplomatic.
Often. Yes.
It's a diplomatic way
Yes.
of asking the question rather than a challenging or confrontive way.
I think the thing about the book that was interesting about how we are a telling society. When we, I like about building relationships with people and that's one thing that bosses or CEOs don't do, to take their direct reports and say, let's have lunch or let's have coffee. They don't take time to do that. They don't take time for that little bit of personal inquiry or asking of the person that would build a relationship. And I think in the relationship building, the closer people get to each other, the more comfortable they feel asking questions.
Yeah. And telling the truth.
Yes.
Right? So if the leader, I like what you're saying, and it's my experience too, Edna, that the exceptional leaders or bosses are the ones who take that time.
Right.
And
in a smaller company too. I mean, you talk about a dental practice, maybe they have 15 dentists there. You're not talking about 5,000.
Right. But in the even let's say in the 5,000, in that 5,000, because I might work with a segment of a 5,000 group, and there might be 40 in that group, and the manager or the managing partner or whatever, depending upon, it could be a law firm, certainly could have 40 people in the full firm, and one of the managing partners could make a decision.
Yes.
And my clients often do,
yes.
sometimes before coaching and sometimes it's after coaching, make the decision to start creating the kind of relationship where that person who works for them would tell them something that was going on. Now, I would also argue that the leader needs to ask the questions, though, to counterbalance that part of the person, whatever we're going to call the subordinate. There's an urge for the subordinate to only give the good news and not tell the truth if it's going to be uncomfortable for the leader or if somehow they're worried it's going to reflect badly on them.
They tell the gossip.
Maybe they tell the gossip.
Yeah.
But if the leader is able to ask, so how are things really going?
Right.
Is there something we should be talking about but we're not? Is there something I should know? Is there something hard to tell me? I really want us to have the kind of relationship where you can tell, and most important, I really want to be the kind of person who hears you, right? Whether you say those words or that's in the attitude.
I always think about he didn't write about this, but I think about, as I work with teachers, we talk a lot about evaluation, and the superior or the principal or the owner of the school, as there are in many countries, will bring that up when it's evaluation time. So Szifra, tell me, but there's no relationship there.
Exactly.
So the teacher doesn't, they absolutely freeze. They say, well, if I give the wrong answer, I won't get a good evaluation. So I think if the top up person had spent a little more time developing a relationship with this teacher, then maybe the teacher could be honest with them.
Right. Yeah. There's no safety built.
No.
Right. No foundation.
No, there's nothing.
Yeah, there's nothing.
That's the reason they have to, that I think we should think about addressing people in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he talks in the end of the book about reflecting, and we're not good at that as a society either.
And when you say we're not good at it, what are you thinking?
We're too fast.
Uh-huh.
We go from one thing to another. We don't spend half hour after the show reflecting on the show.
Right.
I mean, that's an example we can. People don't do many things reflecting on it. It's
right. We go on a retreat in order to reflect,
yes,
instead of having it be built into
right.
Our days. Yeah.
It's like we have a relationship with someone, and we can tell if they're upset or if we've offended them, but we don't reflect on that. We just think, yeah, she's having a bad hair day or something like that. We don't. We need to ask questions, and I think we do that in our business. But that's different when we're trying to use it as a diagnostic tool.
Right, and those are different kinds of questions sometimes, aren't they? Where we're gathering information that is data.
Right.
And in some ways, the kind of thing you and I are talking about, where it's relationship building, maybe one kind of set of questions.
Right.
For the leader who's looking to create the safety with their team, those questions may need to be, again, asking for what might be going wrong that I don't know about.
Right.
But in order to really get an honest answer to that question, a relationship and some expectations need to be created around safety and transparency. I need to be open with you.
Right.
I need to be creating a lot of comfort for you. And sometimes being curious means, in a certain way, for that moment, I give up the power and I give it to you by being curious.
Right. I often do that too, and he mentions it in the book. And I don't know where I started to do it, but when somebody will tell me something, or they give me something and I don't understand it, I think, well, they'll come back to that again. But now I say, give me an example of that. And so a businessman may walk around and talk to people, and people may give them very little information. And for them to say, well, give me an example. I'm not really sure what you mean that it's not safe here.
Right.
And so then again, they're giving up it's a certain humility that I, the boss, don't know everything.
Right.
And that you're going to tell me that. That's when it shifts.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. And it's like, in that moment, it might feel like I'm being deferential to you, even though I think there's a paradox of power. Right. I think the more we can say, I don't know, the more trust we have, the more credibility we have, the more connection we have.
But we don't like that.
Yeah, we don't like that
I don't
moment.
like to say I don't know.
Yeah. And why not?
Because that's kind of ingrained in us. I mean, I've learned, as I work with different kinds of people, to say I don't know everything. My job is to help you to know where to get it. I can't teach you everything, or I can't show you everything, but I can, especially with today's technology, show you where to get it, how to get it. I mean, you don't have to keep it all up here. It's okay to say to people, I don't know, and then for you to check it out. So hopefully technology will change that a little bit for people.
So you're saying that maybe with the technology moving so fast and being so broad that we won't be able to know everything, and it will give people the freedom to say, I really don't know.
I don't know. I don't know everything about something. I mean, that's why we have people check on the internet, and we don't store as much information in our heads because we have it at our fingertips.
Well, and it's even more reason, isn't it, for business people in leadership positions to create a relationship with their teams, because they're really reliant on those experts within the company who do know that technology, or who are technical in some way, or have some segment, because we're kind of siloed more and more, aren't we?
But see, the CEO or the CFO or the general manager, whatever it is, or the principal in the school, or the head of high muckety muck in the hospital, is supposed to know about technology, or they think they are.
Wow.
They're supposed to know how to do Excel or PowerPoint. And then I think, why? Why should you do that? That's not your job. So when someone says, well, I did this spreadsheet on Excel, or I did a PowerPoint presentation, the person up here might never deal with that on a daily basis.
Yeah.
He or she may be in meetings or conferences.
Right.
And the person working for them will be sitting there giving them all this
Well, there's that
information.
kind of technology. I'm even thinking, like in the even more difficult to master.
Yes.
In the situation of, WhatsApp, that person who's running WhatsApp isn't going to know each thing that each engineer is doing, or each support person. They're certainly not going to know how to speak Portuguese and Chinese and Italian and Japanese. And if they don't have a relationship, again, with those people who can say, something's going wrong with this part of the call center, that could be in this case, billions of dollars, right? If the problem doesn't get resolved. So how does that leader create that relationship?
By being humble.
That word.
By really, well, then I'm thinking about that. Does a relationship have to be created in that instance?
And what do you mean?
Do they have to, let's say somebody should report daily to me or monthly to me what's happening, but that should happen without a relationship?
Well,
can that happen without a relationship?
I suppose theoretically. It doesn't seem to happen, though. It seems like do you know the term truth to power, speaking truth to power? Well, if you know the term, then you know it's about how hard that is.
Right.
And that we don't speak truth to power.
No.
Right? We hide truth from power. That's what we do.
Right.
And so, except in the situations where the relationship, either it could be the relationship one-on-one, or the culture in the company or in the firm or in the practice is such that people are safe to tell the truth.
Yeah.
But otherwise, we have a bias towards, keeping ourselves out of the firing line. And bosses historically have not responded well. Leaders have not responded well to people telling them the truth.
And kids don't. Kids and parents, when we talk about parenting, they're the power. They can take away everything that I love, so I'm not going to tell them the truth. I'm going to lie. I'm going to tell a little white lie. I'm not going to, or your teacher, to say to your teacher in school, did you do your homework last night? And you think, oh boy, if I tell her no, I did it, but I left it on the bus. Right,
rather than what might be a forward-moving relationship question, which would be, so what happened? How do we help you remember it for tomorrow? Right?
Exactly.
With the leader, if something goes wrong, asking questions, and this doesn't have to be it could be the manager.
Yes, it could be anything.
It could be anybody, right? Who's, so can you tell me what happened? How do I help you? Are you missing some tools you need to do this job effectively? Is there some way, I can make a difference in making this successful for you? And only after 3 or 4 of those do you say, you know what, we've talked about this a lot of times. Do you have the capacity to do this job? You may not.
Right. I think one of the things that I was thinking about when I finished the book was, what about President Obama?
Huh.
Do people tell him the truth, or are some of the problems that we have today in today's world in the United States because they don't tell him the truth, because they only tell him the good news?
I think that's a fascinating question, and I don't see how any president really gets the whole truth.
No.
I just don't think it's possible. Do you? And how would someone in his position really cultivate a kind of, and maybe he does, I have no idea.
Right.
You know, maybe the word on the street in Washington is you can speak the truth to him.
Right.
But I have no idea.
No, I don't
about
either.
that.
And that would be a good thing if he, I think that's why, and people are often critical of it's even like the governor, that they say, oh, these positions in the state are political. Well, they are, I think, because of the relationship. If Patrick decides to make me, I don't know, head of environmental services, and he and I have played golf together for years, we are more likely to have a better relationship than if he doesn't know me. And I will know, we'll have already worked some of that out.
Yeah.
And I think it happens,
Yeah.
but it happens in a different way, and we call it something different.
Yeah. I find that interesting, and I think you're right that there's certainly the possibility, that there'd be more openness.
Yeah.
If you and I were in politics and you were in office and you brought me in and we'd had whatever relationship we've had, the question I'd also have is, if we had the kind of relationship where I was always reluctant to tell you some of the things I saw,
Right.
then it may not be true that I would tell you more once I was really beholden to you for something I coveted, which was this great position.
But maybe I wouldn't have hired you if I didn't think that you would be honest with me.
Maybe. And maybe we would have had that history
Right.
where I already spoke up and you knew that.
I already know
Yeah.
that we could have an honest relationship.
So what that would mean to me is that you're a person who cares about people being honest with you and who cherishes in some way that openness. You might be a person, Edna, who is more like you described earlier. Don't tell me, I'm the one in power.
Well, I'm too busy. I don't have
too-
time for this. That's
Right.
our big thing.
Right.
Go
right.
see the person out there. They'll give you the information.
Right.
And I think part of that is realistic because there's only so much time you have in a day or a month or...
Right, I think that's true. I do think, though, that sometimes we're misguided and we think that the effective solution is the shortest distance between 2 points. And that feels intuitively correct. However, sometimes disaster happens in the shortest distance between 2 points, and that a little more time, it might be 5 minutes, could be the critical difference and save you hours and hours, days, weeks, months of, picking up the pieces later.
Well, it's like the pilot on an airplane. It's interesting when you watch, they have 4 stripes and he's the big deal, and then the guy has 3 stripes as the co-pilot. And often when there have been mishaps and crashes, they've gone back and checked, well, the co-pilot was hesitant to tell the pilot that, maybe did you look at this switch, or maybe we shouldn't have done that, or maybe we so-and-so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what, right. And that's what I see in variations all the time. And we don't know for sure how many of those mishaps don't happen
Right.
because the relationship was set up so that the one with all the stripes either verbally or non-verbally communicated a kind of openness to feedback. Now, ideally, according to Edgar Schein, and I tend to agree with him, in order to combat that urge not to tell the hard stuff, to either make someone who's already busy feel burdened, or because people like good news, not bad news, to counter that, if that person with all the stripes said, I really want feedback, so be sure, keep your eyes open. If you see me doing something that doesn't seem prudent, please, please, please make sure to speak up.
You know how the airlines get around it? They don't let you and I fly together so that we don't have an dependent relationship.
Interesting. So that's how they get around which part?
With the fact that that you would say as the pilot, tell me if I'm doing something wrong. So they're not really encouraging that. The pilot is still the one who makes the
Wow.
It's
So you're saying they foster this
yes.
don't ask and don't tell.
Right.
As opposed to whatever we called
don't tell,
do ask things.
Right.
Yeah. Huh.
And companies or schools often do that because it's a roadblock if you only have one person. Sometimes they don't. They have a team of people who perform. You and I may perform the same thing, and maybe the boss works with you one time and me another.
Uh-huh.
So it's
Yeah.
And depending on our personalities. That's another book, though.
Yeah, that's
we'll let you
another
write
book.
that book.
Yeah, right.
Or his third book. But
Yeah. I was thinking about another aspect of this, and that's assumptions. And as I was prepping for this show, I was thinking about this funny situation that came up that seemed like a good example of assumptions. And that's this couple that I know. The wife told me this story about how for the first 25 years of their marriage, she really thought, my husband is so cheap, I can't believe how cheap he is. And it all came up because of when she would want to go into their petty cash, he would say, I'll go, how much money do you want? I'll go get it for you. And it just drove her crazy, but she just, said, okay. 25 years later, they're having some conversation, and she was really angry and said, you always want to hold the money, blah, 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 blah. And he said, I don't care about holding the money. I'm just worried that you're going to break the ceramic container that the money's in that I bought when I was in college. And that was her reaction, just like that.
Oh,
it was like,
okay.
for all these years.
So judgment, we make judgment too easily, yes.
Right, and so when we're not curious, this is back a very, to the attitude, we didn't talk much about, that in order to do this all successfully, you really need to have an attitude and a philosophy about curiosity,
yes.
right? And so that example is the one that pops into my mind when I make assumptions and I forget to be curious.
We do that though. We either don't want to be invasive, or we don't know what will happen if we ask the question. Maybe the person will be more upset. So I know I do nothing. Right. I'm not a particularly curious person.
No.
I wait for it to unfold. I don't a lot of questions. And why did you do it? Because I don't like a lot of questions.
To be asked of you.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So sometimes we might do what meshes with, of course, our personality and what we like.
Right.
So if you don't like questions, you might not ask a
Right.
lot of questions for the
I'll
reasons.
volunteer as the relationship unfolds.
Uh-huh.
But don't back me against the wall.
Now, isn't that interesting? So for you, some of those questions would make you feel like you were being backed up against the wall. Yeah. And so there's a fine art, isn't there,
Yes.
to asking questions in a way and then noticing if the person seems to feel
Yes.
backed off, that you might either yourself say, out loud, too
Yes.
many questions, sorry.
Yes.
Or I hope I, wasn't pushing you, or
Yes.
whatever you might, how you
Yes.
might self-correct.
But you have to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay, anything last minute you want people to know? We're almost done, or we are done.
Almost done,
Yeah.
done. Well, I was thinking about in those moments where I really love to be curious, but I'm not because I'm too interested in telling what I know, or so
Well,
I
that's
tell
the
and not
title.
ask.
Don't tell. You're right, don't tell. And I think that we have to be aware of that, because we can tell from the other person's look or how their physical posture, if it's like,
Right.
I don't want it to be about you. I want to be some of it about me.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, but we could ask a few questions even in our personal life.